Welcome, and thank you for tuning in to Instinctive Talk. I'm your host, Jay Insalaco. This episode is to promote hope for my fellow peers and their loved ones who support them. On today's episode of Instinctive Talk, I'm going to be talking about denial. The definition of denial is failure to acknowledge an unacceptable truth or emotion or to admit it into consciousness, used as a defense mechanism. Denial is a term that is used in recovery. A great way to explain recovery is that it's a process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness, live a self-directed life, and strive to reach their full potential. In my experience, it's impossible to reach recovery when you're in denial. In my last podcast episode, I spoke about acceptance. Denial is the opposite. I was in complete denial of my dual diagnosis of bipolar disorder and addiction, which kept me sick for several years. I also spoke about how I accepted being an addict faster than being mentally ill because I felt like I could control my drug use. But after working the 12 steps in a 12-step program, I understood that I was powerless. Admitting powerlessness means admitting that no amount of trying or practicing or self-control is going to change the way that drugs or alcohol affect your brain. Thus, this is the first step in a lifelong journey of recovery. When I realized that, I began my acceptance of my addiction and started to make the changes I needed to make. When I was diagnosed in 1995, I struggled with denial about my diagnosis of bipolar disorder. I couldn't accept that I needed medication, psychiatry, and therapy for the rest of my life. Being a 19-year-old and diagnosed with a mental illness in the mid-90s was very difficult. Nobody I knew was talking about mental health issues. I felt like people could tell just by looking at me that I had a mental illness. I was ashamed and I felt less of a person. Being in denial caused me not to take my medication at the right times of day or night, and even worse, not take them at all. For 7 years I struggled with this, which led to many hospitalizations. I guess I didn't feel like I needed or wanted to be dependent on medication to live a functioning life. Living my life with a mental illness made me feel ashamed and filled my life with personal stigma. It was a feeling of being uncomfortable with myself and anxious about people's opinions, which in hindsight doesn't really matter. What is an example of stigma? When someone with a mental illness is called dangerous, crazy, or incompetent rather than unwell. It's also stigma when a person with mental illness is mocked or called weak for seeking help. Stigma often involves inaccurate stereotypes. If you don't understand this, try and picture in your mind how you would feel if you lived with a mental illness. Try and understand before making generalizations about things you might not understand. I believe that if people in general don't understand something, it's important to empathize. When a person is in denial about a situation they are going through, like I was, it usually has a negative effect on them. In my experience, being in denial has taken away happiness from my life. If I was in acceptance of my diagnosis and treatment earlier in my life, I believe I would have been much happier and reached stability quicker in my life. Life is about connection. We need to have a strong relationship with ourselves first and foremost. We need to have a positive self-image and know what our strengths, weaknesses, and goals are in life. In our connections with others, I believe we need to feel comfortable and secure in these relationships. To be able to share our thoughts and feelings without shame, which could eliminate denial in our lives. If any one of you is having a hard time with your place in life, reach out to a professional and know that you're not alone. If you're having a hard time finding a connection within family and friends, please look into finding support groups within our mental health community. The National Alliance on Mental Illness is a good resource. NAMI is in every county within each state in this country. I want to thank you for tuning in to this episode of Instinctive Talk. If you want to connect with me, please visit my website at instinctivebird.com. If you want to buy a personalized version of my book, No More Crutch, it's also available on my website. If you could, please subscribe and leave a review for the podcast. I would greatly appreciate it. Again, this is Jay Insalaco. Thanks for listening. Tune in next time to Instinctive Talk.